They thought he died in Afghanistan, lost in the dust and chaos of a mission no one ever questioned, buried under a folded flag and a set of forged reports. For 4 long years, the world believed he was gone. His family mourned him. His hometown honored him. His wife broke under the weight of the life she thought she'd lost. But on a quiet December morning, just days before Christmas, a soldier walked back into that same hometown with frost clinging to his boots and winter light sliding across the worn patches of his uniform. He wasn't a ghost. He wasn't a memory. He was real, alive. He moved through the familiar streets with the heavy stillness of someone returning to a past that had moved on without him. Every step felt like walking through an old photograph, familiar yet distant, warm yet hollow. People glanced his way, confused, unsure whether they were seeing a stranger or witnessing an impossibility. The closer he came to the neighborhood he once called home, the slower his steps became. The house appeared just as he had left it. The leaning mailbox, the porch light that flickered stubbornly through every winter, the walkway sprinkled with thin snow. A child's toy lay near the steps, his chest tightened at the sight. He walked up the porch, lifted a trembling hand and knocked. Once, twice. Silence pressed against the door before footsteps surfaced from within, soft, hesitant. The kind of footsteps that suggested the person on the other side wasn't expecting anyone, let alone a man who had been declared dead. The door opened. She stood there, the woman who once waited for him, the woman who cried over a folded flag, the woman who rebuilt her life piece by piece, only to have it all ripped open again in an instant. She wore a winter sweater stretched gently over a 7-month pregnant belly. Her hair was loosely tied, her eyes tired from years of grief and survival. At first, she simply stared at him, expression blank, mind refusing to recognize what she was seeing. Her brows pinched, her lips parted, her hand lifted from instinct, trembling as she reached toward his face. Then the shock slammed into her. Her knees weakened, her breath shattered. Tears burst from her eyes with a sound so fragile it pierced the cold morning. She staggered forward and collapsed into his chest, sobbing like a child, her entire body shaking as if 4 years of grief were being ripped out of her all at once. He caught her immediately, holding her against him with steady, protective arms. "I'm here," he whispered softly. "I'm here. Everything's going to be all right." But even as he held her, his eyes drifted to her swollen belly. Not with anger, but with an ache deeper than words. 4 years was enough time for anyone's world to be rewritten, especially when they believed a lie. Before I tell you what happened next, subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It helps more than you know. Her tears soaked his uniform, soaking the years between them. She pulled back just enough to see his face clearly, still trembling violently. I buried you," she whispered. "They told me you were dead. They showed me paperwork, reports. They said you didn't make it out. Oh God, oh God." He brushed a strand of hair from her face, voice low. "They lied to you." Her breath hitched. Who would do that?" The man who stood on her doorstep, alive, finally looked as if he was ready to speak his truth. His name was Darian Holt, and the man who orchestrated his disappearance, the man who stole 4 years of his life and nearly stole his wife, was his commanding officer, Commander Briggs Soren. Sarah Linden's tears slowed, but her hands clutched his uniform as though afraid he might disappear again. "Darian, tell me everything," she whispered. He exhaled, a long, heavy breath that carried the weight of all he'd endured. It started with a mission that should never have existed. Because while Sarah was breaking down in Darian's arms, across the state, Commander Briggs Soren received a phone call from the base, informing him that the soldier he tried to kill had just checked in alive, and that single moment marked the beginning of his downfall. Darian sat with Sarah inside the dimly lit living room that still smelled faintly of pine-scented candles and freshly washed blankets. The room hadn't changed much. The framed photo of their wedding still hung crooked near the stairwell. The clock above the mantel still ticked a bit too loudly. But the woman sitting beside him was not the same woman he'd kissed goodbye 4 years ago. She held her belly with one hand, wiping tears with the other. Even in her trembling, there was a visible relief, a release of something she had carried for too long. "Please," she whispered, voice cracking, "tell me what happened. How How did you survive? Darian's gaze lowered to his hands, scarred and worn from years of labor, conflict, and unintended captivity. He inhaled slowly. It started the day I was assigned to that covert mission, he began. Sarah leaned closer, eyes wide, clinging to every syllable. He told me it was classified, something only a handful of people knew. He said he'd explain everything to you when I got back. His jaw tightened. I believed him. Commander Briggs Soren, a man who spoke about honor but practiced deceit, a man who wore authority like armor and jealousy like a hidden blade. Darian continued, voice steady but shadowed. He sent me deep into a red zone with no radio. No support, no extraction plan, nothing. Said it had to be silent because of local insurgent networks. Sarah's breath trembled. You trusted him. I did, Darian said softly. He was my superior. I didn't know he hated me. He could still picture the desert heat shimmering as the mission began, still hear the quiet hum of distant gunfire, still feel the sand whipping against his face as he moved deeper into enemy territory. We were supposed to rendezvous with a local contact, he said, except the contact wasn't real. And neither was the mission. Sarah covered her mouth, tears forming again. Darian looked away, eyes distant. I was ambushed. But it wasn't insurgents. It was villagers, angry, terrified, except instead of killing me. He paused. The memory still stirred something raw in him. They helped me, hid me. That doesn't make sense, she whispered. Why would they help you? Because Brig paid men to kill me, Darian said quietly. But those men took the money and disappeared. They never told the villagers the truth. They just abandoned me in the middle of their land. Sarah blinked, horrified. They thought I came to protect them. They believed I was some kind of liaison sent to help defend their village against local oppressors. And for a long time, I believed them. I thought this was the mission. I thought it was part of the operation. She shook her head. So you stayed because you thought you were ordered to? Yes. And I had no way to call back, no radio, no coordinates, nothing. He rubbed a hand over his face. Months passed, then years. I kept waiting for extraction until I realized there was never going to be one. Sarah's heart broke anew. You must have felt so alone. I did. But the villagers, they saved me. They protected me. They treated my wounds when I got sick. I owed them everything. He leaned back, shoulders heavy. 4 years later, one of the older men finally confessed. He knew something was wrong all along. He said the people Brig hired were planning to kill me the first night but never returned, and that Brig made arrangements for the village to be cut off so no messages could get out. Sarah's breath caught. That monster. Darian's eyes darkened. He filed paperwork declaring me dead, held a memorial, told everyone I died protecting my team. A long, harsh breath escaped him. And then he came here, to you. Sarah wiped her eyes again. He said he was sorry. He said you were brave, that you sacrificed yourself. He helped me through everything, or so I thought. Her voice broke. I didn't know what he was. I didn't know what he did to you. I swear to you, I had no idea. Darian reached out, gently placing a hand on hers. I know, he murmured. You were grieving. You were alone, and he knew exactly how to manipulate that. A soft cry came from upstairs, the toddler waking. Sarah froze, eyes darting toward the staircase. Darian gave a small nod. Go, he said gently. Take your time. She hurried upstairs, wiping tears as she went. Darian remained seated, listening to the faint sounds of a small child he had never met, yet who lived in the house that once belonged to him. But upstairs was not the only place where a storm had begun. Because at that same moment, in an office states away, Commander Briggs Soren gripped his phone so tightly his knuckles turned white as a trembling voice on the other end of the line repeated, Sir, he just checked in. Holt is alive. Briggs' heart slammed against his ribs. His face drained of color. His world shifted. He whispered, barely breathing, Impossible. Because the moment Briggs learned Darian was alive, he realized every lie he built. The forged reports. The stolen home, the marriage, was about to collapse, and his first instinct wasn't to confess. It was to cover his tracks, by any means necessary. Commander Briggs Soren stared at the phone long after the call ended, his pulse pounding so violently he could feel it in his teeth. The room around him, A neat office decorated with certificates he didn't earn and commendations he manipulated his way into suddenly felt too small, too bright, too accusing. Darian Holt was alive. Alive. Everything Brig had built, every lie carefully stacked on top of another, every forged report, every whispered manipulation, it all began to wobble like a house built on cracked glass. He staggered backward, gripping the edge of his desk. No, no, this can't be happening, he muttered. He'd staged the perfect death. He'd comforted the grieving widow. He'd married her. He'd moved into Holt's house. He'd fathered a child with her, and another was on the way. He had rewritten Darian's life and his own, in a way he believed could never be undone, until now. His breathing sped up, sharp and erratic. He slammed his fist into the desk, then again, until a framed certificate fell to the floor and shattered. He didn't pick it up. His mind raced. What would happen when Darian reported in? When the truth surfaced? When the military realized the paperwork was manipulated, that the death was staged, that the mission was illegal and the reports falsified? He could lose everything. His rank, his pension, his freedom, his entire life. He grabbed his coat, scrambling for the door. There was no time to think. He had to get ahead of this, had to control the narrative, He stopped dead when he saw a younger soldier walking into the hallway outside his office, clearly startled by Briggs' frantic exit. "Sir, you all right?" the soldier asked. Brigg forced a smile that felt like it might crack his own face. "Fine," he rasped. "Just urgent business." "Is it about Holt, sir?" the soldier blurted out. "Everyone's talking about it." Briggs' blood went cold. Everyone was talking about it. This was spiraling fast. "Get back to work," Briggs snapped, his voice tight with panic. The soldier straightened and quickly retreated. Brigg walked away, sweat forming at his temples. He needed a plan. He needed control. He needed Sarah to be on his side, or at least confused enough to buy him time. Meanwhile, back at the house, Sarah descended the stairs with her toddler on her hip, cheeks still damp from tears. The child had his mother's eyes, warm brown, soft and curious, and he blinked at Darian, studying him with the innocent stare only a little one could have. Darian stood slowly, uncertain. Sarah's voice was tender but trembling. This is my son." Darian swallowed hard. He didn't step forward, he didn't force anything. He simply nodded with a gentle expression the child could feel rather than understand. The toddler reached out unexpectedly, fingers stretching toward Darian's uniform. Sarah froze. Darian inhaled softly. He stepped closer, letting the small hand brush against the fabric. The child giggled, gripping the edge of the worn camo sleeve. Something shifted in the room. Something fragile. Something healing. Sarah's tears returned, but not from fear this time. Darian's voice was quiet. "He seems safe." Sarah nodded, her breath unsteady. "He's a good boy. He didn't choose any of this." A heavy silence settled, thick with years of unsaid truth. "Sarah," Darian murmured, "you don't owe me apologies right now. Or explanations. You believed what they told you. You were grieving, alone, vulnerable. What happened wasn't your fault." Sarah looked down, tears falling on her son's hair. "I want to believe that. But I let him in. I let Brig become everything. And now I just feel sick." Darian reached out, brushing a tear from her cheek with a gentleness that made her cry harder. "You were manipulated," he said. "He saw your pain and used it. That's on him, not you." She broke then, leaning into him for support. The toddler rested his head on her shoulder, sensing the emotion around him. Darian held her steady. But even as this fragile moment unfolded, a car screeched to a stop outside the house. Sarah stiffened instantly. Darian's eyes narrowed. Heavy, hurried footsteps hit the porch, then bang, bang, bang! Someone slammed their fist against the door. Sarah's face drained of color. She whispered, voice barely audible, "That's Brig." Darian stepped forward calmly, too calmly, placing a hand on Sarah's arm. "Go upstairs, take your son." "Darian, no." "It's all right," he said. "I'm not afraid of him." The pounding grew louder, more frantic, more desperate. Darian walked toward the door with the steady, unhurried steps of a man who had survived worse than anything waiting on the other side. Because when Darian opened that door, Briggs Soren wasn't just panicked, he was unraveling. And what he said next would expose the first cracks in the lies he had spent years building. The pounding on the door shook the frame, each strike louder than the last. Darian reached the handle with unhurried calm, the kind of composure only a man forged in war and betrayal could possess. Behind him, Sarah clutched her son and hurried up the stairs, breath trembling, eyes wide with fear she couldn't hide. Darian waited until she was out of sight before he opened the door. Commander Briggs Soren stood on the porch, shoulders heaving beneath his coat, eyes wild with a panic he was struggling, failing to conceal. The cold winter air swirled around him, but sweat trickled down the side of his face. His jaw clenched when he saw Darian full and alive in the doorway. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Briggs swallowed, trying to steady himself. "You—" His voice cracked. He cleared his throat. "You're alive." Darian held his gaze, unblinking. "So it seems." No accusation, no anger, just calm truth. Briggs' breath hitched. You don't understand what's happening right now. We need to talk." Inside, Darian shifted his stance, blocking the entrance with silent authority. "Outside is fine." Briggs flinched at the tone. The soldier who once outranked Darian now stood before a man he realized he had never actually understood. Never truly measured. Briggs forced a stiff exhale. "There's been a mistake. Reports got crossed. The mission was fake," Darian finished. Briggs' eyes flickered. Darian didn't look away. "You sent me to a red zone with no extraction plan," Darian said quietly. "You cut communication. You filed the death report before the mission even began." Briggs' facade cracked. "You don't know the full story." "I know enough." Briggs stepped closer, desperation seeping through the cracks in his voice. "Darian, listen. If you go to command before I explain this properly, both of us are going down. Both of us." Darian raised a brow. "Both?" Briggs swallowed hard, realizing he'd said too much too fast. His breathing grew uneven. Inside the house, a floorboard creaked. Sarah's silhouette briefly shifted at the top of the stairs before disappearing again. Darian didn't look back, but Briggs noticed. His panic sharpened. "Sarah doesn't know the whole situation," Briggs said quickly. "She wasn't supposed to find out like this. I've protected her. I've protected your reputation. I made sure she was cared for when everyone told me to move on. You should be grateful." Darian stepped forward until their faces were inches apart. "Careful." Briggs froze. Darian's voice lowered, not threatening but deadly calm. "You didn't protect her. You preyed on her grief. You moved into her home. You built a life on lies." Briggs' breath shook. "You think you can march back in here after 4 years and take everything away? I rebuilt her life for her. You rebuilt it for yourself," Darian replied. Truth hit Briggs harder than a punch. He tried to regain footing. "Look, there's a way out of this. You don't have to destroy me. We can work something out. I still have influence, friends in command. If you give me a few days, I can fix the paperwork and—" "And what?" Darian asked quietly. "Make me disappear again?" Briggs' face drained of color. Darian had hit the center of the rotten seed. At that moment, the toddler upstairs let out a small cry. Briggs' head snapped upward. He lowered his voice, eyes darkening. "You don't get to come back and disrupt their lives." Darian's expression didn't shift. "They were my life first." Briggs' composure finally cracked. The truth, the panic, the fear, everything burst at once. "You were supposed to die out there," he hissed before catching himself, eyes widening at his own words. Too late. The confession hung between them, sharp and undeniable. Darian didn't react with shock. He simply stared at Briggs as a soldier stares at a battlefield he already expected. Calm. Measured. Ready. Briggs stumbled back a step, the weight of what he'd said crushing him. I didn't mean that." "Yes," Darian replied softly. "You did." Briggs looked around as if the world had suddenly grown too loud, too bright. "You don't understand. I loved her. She deserved better than waiting for a man who might never come home. And you decided that for her? She needed someone. She needed truth," Darian corrected. "And you buried it." Briggs' chest rose in a sharp inhale, anger mixing with terror. "We're not done." "Yes," Darian said, stepping back inside. "We are." He closed the door in Briggs' face with slow finality. Outside, Briggs stood trembling on the porch, eyes wet, anger shaking his hands, breath fogging in the winter air. His downfall had officially begun. Upstairs, Sarah sobbed quietly, knowing she had just heard the first crack in Briggs Soren's empire of lies, because Briggs wasn't going to surrender. Not yet. Not while he still had strings he believed he could pull. And what he did next would force Darian and Sarah into a battle far darker than a conversation on a winter porch. Commander Briggs Soren didn't drive away from the house immediately. He sat in his car, fingers trembling against the steering wheel, breath steaming the windows as panic twisted violently inside him. His confession still echoed in his skull. "You were supposed to die out there." He hadn't meant to say it out loud, but he did, and Darian Holt heard every word. Briggs wiped his face with shaking hands. He couldn't afford to lose control, not now, not with everything at stake. He forced himself into a cold, bitter calm and began dialing numbers. Contacts, favors, people he believed he still controlled. Because if Darian was alive, then Briggs needed to make sure the truth never reached the wrong ears. Inside the house, Sarah sat on the couch, her toddler curled against her side, thumb in mouth. She rocked him gently as her own tears flowed silently. The confrontation downstairs had drained her, emotionally, physically, soul deep. Darian entered softly, lowering himself onto the opposite end of the couch. "Sarah," he said quietly, "you don't have to talk yet, just breathe." She wiped her face. "I heard everything he said." Darian nodded once, slowly. "I never wanted this," she whispered. "I never wanted any of it. He told me you were gone. He told me he was the only one who cared, and then—" Her voice cracked. She buried her face in her hands. Darian leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes steady and gentle. "I know. None of this is your fault." She lifted her head, eyes red and swollen. "You don't hate me?" "No," he replied simply. Her breath shook. "But everything's so broken. The lies, the marriage, the kids, the house, the paperwork." She gestured vaguely, overwhelmed. "I don't even know where to start." "We start," Darian said calmly, "by taking back the truth." She looked up, something fragile and hopeful flickering in her expression. That afternoon, Darian walked into the nearest military installation. No hesitation, no fear. His boots echoing through the tiled hallway. Conversations died as soldiers turned to stare. Rumors had already spread like wildfire. Holt is alive. Holt is back. Holt wasn't dead. The base commander, Colonel Madsen, stood frozen behind his desk when Darian entered his office. "Holt?" he breathed. "How is this possible?" Darian saluted, then placed a thick folder on the desk. Notes he'd taken in Afghanistan. Dates, statements from villagers, and detailed accounts of Briggs' fabricated mission. Colonel Madsen flipped through the pages, his face darkening with every line. This is criminal," he muttered. "If this is true—" "It is," Darian said. "And Briggs Soren, he filed your death certificate himself." The colonel swallowed. "Holt, this isn't just misconduct. This is court-martial, dishonorable discharge, possible federal charges, attempted murder." Darian gave a single nod. "I'm aware." The colonel sat back, stunned. "We're reopening your file immediately. And Holt," his voice softened, "I'm sorry for what you went through." Darian inclined his head in gratitude. "I'm not here for pity, sir. I'm here for justice." Back at the house, Sarah paced nervously as her toddler played with blocks on the floor. Her heartbeat thudded in her ears. Every noise outside made her flinch, expecting Briggs to come storming back. When the doorknob finally turned, she rushed forward, but it was Darian, safe, calm, determined. "What happened?" she asked, chest tight. "Everything's in motion," Darian replied. "An investigation has already begun. Briggs won't be able to hide what he did." Sarah covered her mouth. Relief, fear, hope, it all blended into trembling silence. Darian stepped closer, lowering his voice. "It won't be easy. He's going to fight. He's going to lie. But the truth is stronger than anything he built." Tears welled in her eyes again. "Darian, I don't know how to thank you after everything He stopped her gently. "You don't have to thank me. Just tell me the truth moving forward. That's enough." Sarah nodded, wiping tears with the back of her hand. The toddler wobbled over to Darian and held up a block as if offering it. Darian smiled softly and took it, sitting on the floor beside him. That simple moment, quiet, ordinary, pure, struck Sarah so deeply she had to steady herself against the couch. This was the man she had believed lost forever. This was the father her children deserved. This was the truth Brig had tried to erase. But Brig wasn't disappearing. Far from it. That night, after failing to convince anyone at the base that Darian's reappearance was some kind of misunderstanding, Brig realized he had only one option left: destroy the remaining evidence before investigators reached his files. And he wasn't afraid to cross any line to do it. Because while Darian and Sarah began piecing their world back together, Brig made one final desperate move, one that would either save him or send him spiraling into the downfall he feared most. Night settled uneasily over the town. But in Commander Brig Soren's mind, there was no darkness, only a frantic red haze. His career, his fabricated reputation, his stolen family, his carefully arranged life, everything he built was cracking apart, and he knew it. Inside his office at the base, he tore through drawers and cabinets, ripping out files, shredding papers, smashing flash drives beneath his boots. Every document felt like a loaded gun pointed at him. Every date, every signature, every mission detail he had manipulated was a trap tightening around his throat. This can't be happening, he muttered to himself, sweat dripping down his temples. He was supposed to be dead. He was supposed to be gone. But Darian Holt was alive, and Brig's lies had run out of places to hide. As he destroyed evidence, he didn't notice the soft click of the door opening. Colonel Madsen stood there. A military police team flanked him. Brig froze mid-rip, a half-shredded report dangling from his fingers. "Commander Soren," Madsen said, voice cold as iron, "you are under arrest for falsifying military documents, staging the death of a U.S. soldier, abuse of authority, obstruction of communication, and conspiracy to commit murder." Brig's mouth fell open. No, this isn't what it looks like. I can explain." "Save it," Madsen snapped. "Everything you've touched is under audit. Every lie you wrote is already unraveling." Brig lunged toward the colonel in desperation, but the MPs grabbed him instantly, pinning him to the desk as he thrashed. "You don't understand," Brig screamed. "She loves me, that life, those kids, they're mine. Holt doesn't get to take everything from me." Colonel Madsen leaned forward, eyes like frost. "You didn't take a life, Soren. You tried to steal one." Brig's screams echoed down the hallway as he was dragged away, kicking, pleading, breaking. His downfall was complete. While Brig faced the consequences he had evaded for years, Darian returned to Sarah's home, and this time he entered not as a ghost returning from the dead, but as a man reclaiming what had been stolen from him. Sarah sat on the couch, hands clasped together, waiting. When he stepped inside, she rose slowly. Her face was still streaked from tears earlier, but now there was something softer there, something hopeful. "What happened?" she whispered. "It's over," Darian said gently. "He's been arrested. There's enough evidence to keep him behind bars for a long time." Her knees nearly buckled with relief. She sat down heavily, covering her face as emotion washed over her. Darian approached and lowered himself beside her. "You're safe now. Your son is safe. The baby is safe." Sarah let out a sob, not of grief, but release. "He controlled everything," she whispered. "For so long. He took your life, he took my choices, he took my hope." Darian reached out, placing a steady hand over hers. "He doesn't get to take anything else." She looked at him then, really looked, and the weight in her eyes melted into something tender. "You came back," she said softly. "You came back even though the world thought you were gone." "I never stopped wanting to," he replied. She inhaled shakily. "I've made mistakes. I believed lies. I let myself fall apart, but I never stopped wishing you were alive. I just never imagined I'd open my door one day and find you standing there." Darian brushed a tear from her cheek. "We don't need to rush anything," he said. "We've both been through enough. Healing takes time." Sarah nodded, tears slipping silently down her face. "But," Darian continued gently, "I want to be here. For you, for your son, for the baby. None of what happened was their fault." He exhaled slowly. "I want to help raise them. With you. If you'll let me." Sarah's hand covered her mouth as another sob broke free. This one from pure emotion. You'd do that?" she whispered. "After everything? Even though they're not. They're innocent," Darian said softly, "and they deserve a life full of love. If you want me here, I'm here, for all of you." Her tears finally overran her strength, and she leaned into him, crying softly against his chest. He held her without hesitation, one arm around her, the other resting protectively over her unborn child. The toddler toddled over and pressed his small hand against Darian's knee, smiling without understanding. Darian scooped him gently into his lap, and the child giggled, a sound that filled the house like a long-forgotten melody. Sarah watched through watery eyes, heart cracking open in a new way, a way that felt like healing, a way that felt like home. Darian looked at her, his voice warm and steady. "We'll take it slow, one day at a time, one day at a time," she whispered back. Outside, snow began to fall softly, quiet, gentle, cleansing. Inside, a broken family began its slow, hopeful rebuild. And miles away, Briggs Soren sat behind locked bars, stripped of his rank, his power, his lies, left only with the truth. He could no longer escape. Darian Holt had won, not through violence, not through rage, but through truth, justice, and the heart Briggs could never break. And if you've been listening this far, subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments what time it is where you're watching from. It helps more than you know.